If you're in the business world and you haven't been living under a rock, then you've probably heard of the Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett. Not that long ago, he put out a video that revealed how he has made $1.2 million per year with one podcast. Everyone talks about the guests on the Diary of a CEO, but I don't think that's the main reason why the podcast works. There are thousands of podcasts with big guests that just never grow. And after watching this recent video that Stephen put out, I knew that I had to dig in deeper to figure out their exact system and how can we implement that at scale for our podcasts. So we're going to look at how the show is structured, how the audience discovers it, how they leverage it to make money. And most importantly, why millions of Americans come back every week. In fact, they post twice a week now. And after seeing what I saw on his behind the scenes video, I want to translate that to you so you can understand and see how it could possibly work for you as well.
We aren't just a video production company, we are business solution driven creatives. And this is More Than Meets the Eye.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the More Than Meets the Eye podcast, where we talk about what's behind a person, a product, or a practice, especially when it comes to marketing and podcasting. I'm Jared Taylor, and I've got my coffee, and I want to welcome you to JT Visuals. That's spelled without the letter I because there's more than meets the eye. Today, we're looking at what is behind the practice and, as much as we can, the person behind Stephen Bartlett and the Diary of a CEO podcast and its success. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but Joe, you got something on your chest.
When I failed my first 8 business, I chalked it up to a couple of things. Number one, I was very proud and I didn't learn how to build a business. But the second thing I realized is I didn't go to school for this.
And it's fun to try to figure things out and explore, but then there comes a point where you're like, wait, hold on. What are all the other successful business owners doing?
We've provided something for you if you feel the same exact way. We've provided Skool, Skool, entrepreneur experience, where you can actually have free content and a community of people that are also in there that are entrepreneurs that love to give feedback and ask for feedback. If you don't feel like you have the resources enough to help you become successful, join our Skool.
It starts for free. So what are you waiting for? Go to jtvisuals.com/Skool. That's JTVisuals without the I, and that's Skool with a K.
Now back to the show.
So the first things first, I got some help with our producer, Azaria. And we need to audit this podcast and figure out where it is with all of the numbers. And there are many social platforms that they post on. They're posting on video, on YouTube. They're doing YouTube shorts for clips. They're doing Instagram reels, and they're doing TikTok for sure. I'm not sure about all the other platforms, but let's dig in. We're going to figure this out in real time. Okay, so I found them on TikTok, and actually this is interesting because I like analyzing what's the profile photo, how many followers, what's the name, what's the username, because there's a nickname and a username. And he has 4.6 million followers, but not just the followers. Let's look at some of this. Okay, see, this is why it's not all about followers. There are some clips in here. That's 12,000. And 12,000, that's a lot. And there's 9,400 on one, but these are recent. You know, they keep rolling out. It takes time for it to snowball and catch up. But then we see 400,000 views, and we see 275,000 views, 600,000 views on these videos, which just shows that the content they're putting out, people are watching it and they're liking it. On top of that, he's accumulated 4.6 million followers. And on TikTok, they title it the podcast. The Diary of a CEO is what they made the nickname, is the podcast name. So now it's searchable. If they must have found out that people on TikTok are searching the Diary of a CEO and they're searching Stephen Bartlett. And so which one comes up? And actually on TikTok, you can have a username, and that username is your @ symbol. It has to be unique. And somehow he got @Stephen. And it's been on that for a long time. And then there's the Diary of a CEO as the profile. What does it look like on Instagram?
Instagram is basically the same thing. It's also called the Diary of a CEO podcast with @Stephen.
Okay, so that's an interesting format. So he actually combined podcast show with personal brand. So when you click and you watch one of these, it shows up as the Diary of a CEO. It doesn't say Stephen. So it doesn't look like personal brand on this. What about his followers on Instagram?
3 million.
3 million. So he's got more on TikTok. That's interesting. What about the profile photo? Is it a logo or is it a person?
It's Stephen's face with DOAC.
Okay. So that's something that's food for thought. On the bio, it says the room where it all happens, and then it gives information hosted by Stephen Bartlett, joined 15 million plus people by subscribing to us below. Their ask on TikTok is to go and subscribe on YouTube. That's very interesting. That's good. It's direct, and there's only one. There's only one call to action. He doesn't have a link tree. He doesn't have the Metricool smart links, and he doesn't have Lemonade. Delete Lemonade from your profile on TikTok if people know what I mean. What about on Instagram? What's his bio look like?
Yeah, the bio says the world's fastest growing community of people who are striving to better themselves, hosted by @Stephen, and then there's one link. When I click on it, there's 2 options to subscribe on YouTube or join the DOAC circle.
Okay. Click the DOAC circle. I want to see what that is. I'm wondering if it's like some sort of insider thing, like a community like Skool.com or something.
Before the cameras roll, after they stop, and in the spaces between that shape everything. Join the minds behind the Diary of a CEO, access the unfiltered conversations, the breakthrough insights, and the community that's redefining what it means to think deeply about the world we're building.
Okay, that's cool. So that's their exclusive content then.
Exclusive content, inner circle, unreleased episodes, insider knowledge, early access.
Does that cost? Does it say? I'm sure it does.
It's €6.99 per month or $69.99 for the year.
Okay. So yeah, he created a subscription service to get more out of it. And I wonder at what point that he decided that was something to do, because I know where we struggled when we put out exclusive content and tried to charge even less. We knew we weren't like at that level, so we tried to charge less, but it didn't bring good results, and I didn't actually think that was a good next step, and we did it too early. We did it way too early. You got to wait till you have a lot more listeners to be able to do something like that. Okay, so that's interesting about the socials. I'm sure there's other platforms he's on. I'm assuming he's on LinkedIn, probably Twitter, probably somewhere in Facebook, but I'm guaranteeing that TikTok and Instagram has to be the largest social platforms. So now when they do that, they have all these clips. A lot of people will see the clips and then push them to go and subscribe. So if we look at YouTube, this is where it gets interesting. There's 15.3 million subscribers. Subscribers on YouTube are way more valuable than followers on TikTok. And this is significantly higher, 3 times higher than what we were seeing on TikTok. 4.5 million views 4 days ago, 2.6 million views 7 days ago, 3.2 million views 12 days ago. This is crazy. Like the results of the conversations and how they package their videos and what they're able to show over and over and over. This is interesting to me. There's StephenBartlett.com, and then there's all the social platforms. So, yep, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn. There's something called Book, and then there's 100 CEOs newsletter and Diary of a CEO newsletter. So they do the newsletter. It looks like that's how they can collect info to grow their audience. If I click on Book, what is it? Where does it take me? It's literally his book. I didn't know if it was booking for a calendar or if it was buying some book, and it's buying a book. It actually says pre-order Stephen's new book. So he's using this platform now to be able to be that go-to person for what makes him unique, which is interviewing, gathering information, and then presenting it in new ways. Okay, so now in this video that I watched, there was a part where he said right away in this video, he says, this podcast is about this podcast. And this works, though, because the audience is already invested, because they want to know more behind the scenes of who he is. And so the listener is thinking, I already listen, and I want to understand the machine behind it. And so that confirms the click immediately, which is really critical for retention. Then he brings it to a relatable origin story because he talks about how when he first started, and I believe he said 9 years ago. 9 years ago. So this podcast has been going for 9 years, and we're all thinking, oh, he made $1.2 million from a podcast. That must have been easy. But how long until he did that? And that's actually the real barrier. What is it when you can start taking matters into your own hands and get sponsors? And I've heard a lot of mixed results. I know a local podcaster that before they even shot, got a sponsor and made money from day one before they even prove themselves. So sometimes you just got to get people to believe in you and tell them the project you're starting and you would like for them to be a sponsor for it. But then after that, it makes you wonder, like, at what point can you go and get big fish sponsors like what Stephen Bartlett did? So he started out with a cheap microphone and recording under a duvet, and he edited himself. It helps us when he shares that in his video. It actually helps us think like, oh, I could start one. So it kind of humanizes him. But then, like, here was one of the important things that I realized after watching his video behind the scenes was really the habit engine. He said that he posted every Monday, and that was what made a difference. And then he looked at the listener behavior, and he said that he learned that 50% of the listeners listen during transit. And after he learned that information, he's like, okay, so now I'm going to release every Monday at 7 a.m. because that's when people are in transit most of the time. And that helps listener behavior, joining them, meeting them where they are. And then it became so much more than that by doing it weekly. It became a weekly ritual for those listeners. So I think that's huge. It's not just publishing content to put it out there and hope someone sees it. He's meeting them where they are and helping create habits that involve listening to his show. And they keep coming back because he keeps putting it out there, and it's the kind of content that they're interested in. So then there's another part in the video that I think you guys should know. And that part is when he reveals 95% of podcast discovery actually happens outside of the podcast apps. Meaning it's not Apple Podcasts, it's not Spotify. 95% of the discovery is outside of those platforms. And they don't even provide a lot of promotion opportunity anyways. So he built discovery through guests who bring audiences and the YouTube algorithm. And he got good at knowing how to show up on the YouTube algorithm. And then, of course, he has all of his short form clips going that point back to it. And it looks like he also has a newsletter. So there's the fourth thing. That newsletter is capturing existing audiences. Since you have to fight to be on the algorithm again anyway, that means the 15.3 million subscribers he has, it's possible he doesn't show up on their algorithm again. So if he has a newsletter and he has millions in the newsletter, he can put out a post providing value within the context of the video, which intrigues people to want to go and listen again. So adding email to your system, some sort of newsletter that points people towards the episode every time it releases, is a great way to own your audience. And there's a certain way you can do it to make sure that there's at least 20% open rate on your emails. Okay, so Azaria, this is interesting. So he has all these high-profile guests. And then in this video, he actually reveals that he cares so much about the quality of the conversation and that he wants the listeners to feel like they can listen to good conversations. He has completely deleted episodes and never released them. It was rare, but it's happened one or two times. And now imagine that, and we edit and have a whole conversation, arrange a whole thing, but then it actually came down to the dedication to those who listen and making sure it's good and protects the quality of the show itself.
And that's why it's important to qualify guests before they come in to make sure they're going to align with the topics and the values of the show.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think that for them, when those have happened, was after qualifying really well, and that's why they've had so few.
Right. There would be more if they let anyone be on the show.
Yep. So that's important because we ourselves easily can turn our podcast into a guest experience only, like where it's only focused on that and it's not focused on the actual content for what listeners can grow in and deem valuable. So it's important to really balance all of that. And that really builds the trust, which is what he's done. And then that trust over time isn't linear, it compounds.
Well, and if your listeners don't trust you, you won't have listeners and your guest experience won't be as valuable. So it kind of goes in a circle.
Yeah. But what's the best way to actually monetize a podcast while still keeping trust? Sponsors, which is a segue to our sponsor, JT Visuals, the guest experience. We'll speak more on that later. Okay, so he does the method for sponsorships in the episodes where he's doing host-read ads, which is valuable because when the host reads it, they know how to make it work. They know how to articulate it and share the story behind why someone needs that product versus if someone else just wants to submit some commercial, it's going to be a little too sales forward and not story driven. And so when he does it, he also only accepts ads and does sponsorships for the products that he actually believes in. So it requires a good vetting process and make sure it's actually valuable to those that want to buy it, who are the listeners. And that's cool too. That surprised me because you think you want to be monetized by YouTube and get to a point where YouTube just goes, all right, we can monetize you. And then you make all the money from the ads that YouTube decides to put on there. But the thing is, YouTube doesn't really consult you about what kind of ads go on there. But if you took the matters into your own hands, that's exactly what Stephen did. He took matters in his own hands and went direct to CEOs and made deals. Because when you do it the other way, there's a return that's like $25 to $50 per 1,000 downloads, which is not very much money that a creator gets for ads versus you can go direct, and he is now at $1.2 million per year just by doing that.
It might be a little more work to find your own sponsors, but it's worth it. Exactly.
The effort level is higher, but the effectiveness is much higher as well. But something I really like in the design of the ads that I think we should start doing is the progress bar on the bottom of the screen, just to help people know that this is an ad. Sometimes when you're listening to a podcast and it's a host-read ad, it can feel like the podcast is still going, which is kind of the point, but it can be abrupt if you don't do it correctly. And on YouTube, if you have that progress bar, it just kind of shows that the ad won't last very long. Don't worry, we're not doing a 5-minute infomercial until you buy, you know?
Yeah, people want to know, is this 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, or 5 minutes?
Yep, exactly. And the goal is to be really short for it to be most effective anyways. And then you frame it in a way that is beneficial to the listener. When I failed my first 8 businesses, it was because I didn't know exactly what to do, and I was stubborn about it. It's like in story form. That's one of our ads that we've done. You probably already heard it in this podcast. There was another thing that I found pretty interesting that I've been itching to try, and I'm seeing podcasts like The Diary of a CEO and several other ones do this. And that is a medium clip, like a longer horizontal YouTube-friendly clip that is 12 minutes long, maybe 15, and it's just a segment that people perhaps missed in the long form and couldn't get in the shorts. And I see that he has that. So he has not just one channel, but he also has a second channel. So I know in the past, a lot of people would make separate channels for shorts, for clips, and for other things. But it's like, do we still do that? And on one of them, I actually was surprised because he has listed The Diary of a CEO shorts, and this one seems to be inactive. pretty old content of the latest videos that are up there. And I think that was experimental, and then he left it attached to the YouTube channel. But then there's another one called Clips, which in our language, we usually say clips, and that's our like 1 to minute 30 of social shorts. But I don't know what else you would call this if it's like medium. So there's clips in here. And this is active. And one of them is like, the real reason America has no idea what's coming. And it's 20 minutes. And then there's one that's the simple way to earn $100,000 from $0 in 64 minutes. And this is one from an episode that are highlights based on like Cody Sanchez and Alex Hormozy and this other guy, I don't know. So they just put out clips like this that are featured for YouTube. Do you see it on YouTube?
Yeah, I found it. I found it interesting that a lot of the thumbnails have his exact same face. Like they used the same picture of his face for a lot of thumbnails.
Oh, that is actually very interesting. I know that every episode, isn't it different on the long episodes?
Not necessarily.
Oh, interesting. I mean, his personality is actually pretty tame like that.
I'm scrolling through some latest videos in the original YouTube, and there are some different ones, but the first 3 are the same face, and then it gives variety after that.
That's interesting. Do you notice like in the top left too, they started putting new in the thumbnail, and then they go back and change the thumbnail later?
Oh, yes, I do see that. And then they changed that little logo to just be DOAC instead of new. So there's still something in that corner.
And that's actually very interesting to me too, because I've talked about not putting logos in thumbnails, but they put it in there. They didn't put the business logo. They put the Diary of a CEO logo in there.
It's fairly small, but it does seem unnecessary.
They have a whole team that's just experimental for this kind of stuff. And so what works today might not work tomorrow, but it seems to work for them. And I think just him having his face is what legitimizes some things. But it is interesting. All the thumbnails, they really show something. Like there's one that's the real reason nuclear war is closer than you know. And then it says the truth on the thumbnail and shows a big nuclear explosion, which looks like an AI generated thing. But if we watch it, I'm sure it doesn't actually have that in the video.
Yeah, there's always an image like in between two people's faces.
Yeah, see, it's
with
him talking.
Also having words.
Yeah, it's him at the round table talking about it, which that's interesting. And he's not losing credibility doing this. So it almost goes to show like maybe there is.
It's a representation of what they talked about, and it's obvious to the audience that that's not legitimately going to be in the video.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in those kind of cases, it's probably better to actually show something visual in the thumbnail like that. Now, something I am seeing is they do keep a theme for their thumbnails. And they've stuck to a single color, and that color's red, and it's black and white. The big face is on there, very similar to how we do some thumbnails. But they do show a lot more words than what we usually do, and that's interesting. So I'm wondering if that means we can get away with just a little bit more words now.
It depends. Some of them are 3 words and some of them are a little bit longer.
Now, something he does really good, it looks like, is they put the high-profile guest in the title, so it helps with discoverability. I mean, it cuts off a lot of them. Like, he has Wesley Huff. I like that one. Shout out to that episode. That was a good one. Whoa! Look at their intro hook. That's next level. If you go and watch any of his episodes, watch their intro. It's actually really good. So what I did notice, though, is when they make their 30-second hook based on what was already in the conversation, they use that as their trailer promotion right when the episode releases. That's the first clip they put out, is that intro hook becomes the trailer.
He highlights a word in each of the thumbnail images in red.
Yeah, it does create a difference. He goes edge to edge on these thumbnails.
Yeah, there are no borders, not a whole lot of negative space.
Which when you're competing against the rest on YouTube, it doesn't need to be a good design for thumbnails. It needs to be effective design.
Normal graphic design rules may not apply here.
Yeah, I think it's really changed the game. Okay, so After looking into all of that, we have found out that there are 5 pillars of the Diary of a CEO system, and we would love to help you implement these systems. The 5 pillars consist of consistency. That's number 1. And then the second one is guest leverage. Now, in the video where he goes behind the scenes, he talks about how he ended up hiring a team to be able to go and vet and search for high-profile guests that would actually bring discoverability. They're not just talking about people the business owner knows around. No, this job is to go and search and find those who have followings already, and that helps increase the show. That's guest leverage. And then the third thing is distribution. So when they put it on YouTube and do the thumbnails, they also do social clips and they do it consistently. And that helps create discoverability through the distribution. And then the fourth thing is quality control. So they have this high quality control that they'll even delete an episode if they need to. And I'm not sure what the backside looks like for when an episode is done for QC. Does he lay eyes on it? Or does he lay eyes just on the visual aspect? Does he listen to his podcasts after? I'm assuming that he has high-end production people that he trusts and got to a point where he completely delegates it, but maybe he's so smart with the social aspect of things that he's making sure the titles and thumbnails and everything are a pass, or he'll give feedback afterwards and let them run. I would like to know a little bit more about that side of things. So if you guys know anything, let me know. And then the fifth thing is direct monetization. Cut out the middleman. Don't do it the way that you think you should by letting YouTube monetize you with their ads, or with podcast platforms offering to monetize where it's $25 per 1,000. I was actually monetized once before on Anchor FM before Spotify bought them. When we were monetized for that, it was $10 per 1,000 downloads. So we made like $5 because we only had like 500. But to us, that was cool because we weren't leveraging business to be able to make more money. But it's so much easier to ask for a $500 sponsor or a $1,000 sponsor and then get a yes from that, and you make significantly more money. So if anybody wants to sponsor our episodes, then let us know. If it's something I believe in, then I'd be willing to accept. So those are the 5 pillars. There's consistency, guest leverage, distribution, quality control, and direct monetization. Create that habit engine, that authority engine. And if you need some assistance during this, all you have to do is just subscribe to this YouTube channel and you will see your business marketing and branding and podcasts grow. Let's get to $1.2 million a year or more. Who wants that? All right, thank you so much for tuning in on this one. Remember to keep posting, keep doing the reps, and keep on keeping on.